What is going on, my Petro powered dudes? I am with the 890 Duke R. This is a bike that I'm super excited about because a lot of you guys were recommending that I purchase this bike whenever I sold my F900R. Now, speaking of F900R, someone special here today, and that person owns this bike, and that person happens to have purchased my F900R. I know YouTube is a crazy world, it's huge, but it's actually a very small world as well, because the gentleman standing right in front of me, his name is Chris, and he owns this bike. So a special thank you to Chris. I really appreciate it for loaning me your bike. So I'm sure all of you already know this, but the 890 Duke R replaces the previous generation's 790 Duke. They've made a lot of improvements on this bike and completely redesigned everything, including the engine and the chassis. What separates this bike from the last one is that not only is it more powerful, but it is also a lot lighter. This motorcycle is 406 pounds wet. In the next episode that's going to come after this, I'm actually going to compare my own street triple next to the 2020 890 Duke R. I know a lot of you guys have been requesting that, and that's something definitely going to come after this. So let's talk a little bit facts and figures about this bike. The fuel tank on this is going to be a little bit smaller than my street triple. You're talking about a 3.7 gallon fuel tank. The engine is 899 cc, and you have a one-piece aluminum subframe in the back, making the bike super light. If you guys have read anything about the KTM 890 Duke, KTM calls this the scalpel, the track scalpel. And I believe it. As far as the electronics are concerned, it has an electronic ride-by-wire. It has 4 different rider modes. The rider modes are Sport, Street, Urban, and Rain. One of the cool things that this bike has is an LCD screen, and that LCD screen will tell you if your engine temperature is warm enough to ride the bike, and if it's not, it'll tell you as well. And it'll also tell you what rider mode you're in and everything like that. It's pretty intuitive, it's pretty simple, and once we're on the road, we're going to talk a little bit more about it. So this bike does have a few modifications. One major modification, if you look down below, is that this has a full titanium Akrapovic exhaust system. The weight savings on that Akrapovic is probably anywhere north of 10 pounds at least. And the other major thing that this bike has are carbon wheels. So a stock KTM 890 Duke is going to be 406 pounds. But this particular model here that we're looking at, because of the exhaust system and the BST wheels, is about roughly around 385 pounds. So I'm really excited to ride this bike for the first time, but I think now it's time for us to take it on the road and see what it's all about. Once again, after we're done, I'm going to compare this bike to my Street Triple RS.
All right, so boy, I gotta tell you, this thing is light. But one thing about this motorcycle for you short dudes is that it is a pretty high bike. It is much higher than my Street Triple. It is the same as the R6, but believe it or not, the width of the seat is taller, so this way it makes the bike seem like it's a higher seat than it actually is. But in comparison to the R6, it's pretty much the same. And also, oh baby, oh yes, sounds delicious. So currently ABS is set to road and it is on sport mode, but boy does she sound delicious. Oh man, that sounds freaking good, man. It is a rather tall bike, so I'm gonna have to get used to it. And it doesn't have quick shift. Man, good torque. So it doesn't have a quick shifter on this, unfortunately. But I gotta say, at first impression of this bike is that it is smooth. Just a little jerky on first gear between 2,000 and 3,000 RPM. It likes being higher up in the gears. I don't blame it. But man, I love the sound. Feels very sporty. Woo! The front lifts. The front goes up. Oh, those pops. That's a lot of fun. Sound makes such a big difference on a bike, man. So before we get too carried away with every little thing that comes to mind, Let's break this review up into different segments. We're going to break it up into comfort, we're going to break it up into styling, and performance. The first thing I want to talk about is comfort. Now, the handlebars on this they feel a little bit lower. On my Street Triple, you're actually sitting inside of the bike, but on this, I feel like you're sitting on top of it. The seat is 33.3 inches for you short dudes, just like me. If you haven't watched my video for short people yet, make sure to go check that out, because that'll give you some tips on how you can ride a bike like this. My inseam is 30 inches as an FYI. So the way I ride the bike is by scooching my butt towards the left, and that's how I can put my foot on the left hand side and stabilize myself. Coronado, here we come. So the handlebars, like I was mentioning, is pretty high up, and you're sitting on the bike. The seat is super soft and it's wide, making the bike seem a little bit taller than it actually is. The tank and the entire profile, as I look down, looks pretty slim. This bike, the suspension sag is set to about 27 millimeters. Now, typically for a comfortable bike, the suspension is typically set up anywhere between 30 to 32, depending on weight and rider's ability. So since this is set up at 27, for me, because we checked it before we came here, it is on the stiff side, but for Chris, the owner, it's perfect, but for me it's a little bit stiff. So that being said, even at a stiff setting right now, I don't feel like the bike is very uncomfortable. Now, once we do the comparison between my bike and this, I'd really like to find out, and I'd really like to sit on the bikes back to back and give you guys a comparison of what it feels like to sit on them. But for now, that's my accurate description of how it is so far. And so the roads that we're driving in right now, they're typical roads, because I'm assuming a lot of you are in the same position as me. You're either going to be riding it for fun, or you're going to be riding it to work. Well, I hope you don't ride this bike to work. It's a fun bike. You should be riding it for fun mostly, but if you do, this could be a good commuter bike. Although it is a naked bike, so if you're commuting on the highway all the time, the wind can be an issue. That's the only gripe. But otherwise, the bike feels light. It feels very nimble. I would love to take this thing on the twisties. Next time I go to Chris's house, I'll take it on the twisties and see what it could do up in Palomar Mountain. Suspension wise, man, I gotta say, this bike is a light and nimble motorcycle lover's dream. It is a paradise because it feels so flickable. It feels so light. I could throw this into the corners, I'm sure, if I take it to the track, or if I take it to Palomar Mountain or somewhere twisty. But it could also be boiled down to the BST rims that are on this. The BST rims takes off about 8 pounds or 8 to 10 pounds. And that makes a huge difference on how light the steering feels. And of course, let's not forget, it has a full titanium exhaust system, which reduces an additional 10 pounds. So that possibly has something to do with it. This bike is not stock, unfortunately, so I can't give you a stock comparison of what it would feel like if you were to buy one from the showroom floor. Boy, I can't believe how vicious this bike sounds with a full acro exhaust. If you buy this bike, you gotta get this thing. The camera really doesn't do it justice. So now let's talk a little bit about the performance, because this is where the bike shines. They call this bike the Scalpel, and I believe it. Wow, I've been meaning to ride this bike for a very, very long time, and I think good things come to people who wait, and I've waited long enough. When you give this bike the full beans, like I'm talking about a good crack of the throttle, the front end wants to lift up. So it's got 70 foot-pounds of torque, and I think this is the reason why. And plus, the bike weighs about 385 wet. So when you have carbon fiber rims in the front, when you got 70 foot-pounds of torque, and when you got a wet weight of 380 pounds, you can imagine the front end wanting to be very playful. Alright, time to have some fun with this thing. on this thing wants to go light so much. Oh man. To be honest with you, I'm a little afraid of riding this thing at high speeds. Because it's such a playful, frisky bike, it's got so much get up and go. And it sounds so good, I just want to keep pushing it. But I'm just afraid that since it's not my bike, this thing is going to go light on the front on me and lift up, and I don't know what to do if that happens. So, that being said, it's a very, very playful bike, very frisky, very fun, loves to be high up in the revs, and it's got plenty of torque, plenty of horsepower. With the full Akrapovic exhaust, I believe it has not had its full tune as of yet. But with the full tune, I'm sure this thing will push up to 130 and increase the torque. Oh baby. Man, whenever you rev match this thing onto the lower gears, it sounds wonderful. I love it. I love it. It's great. This thing is fun. And considering how tall the bike is, I pretty much got used to it already. Oh, there goes the front end. I lifted her up a little bit, but it's so easy to do. It takes very little effort. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be the end of this review. I absolutely love this bike, and I'm really happy that I waited a very long time to ride it. With the Akrapovic exhaust system, as you heard, I was smiling from ear to ear. It's a whole lot of fun, and between 1 and 3,000 RPM, when you give it a little crack of the throttle, you can hear the exhaust. It sounds angry, it sounds vicious, and I absolutely love that. And as an FYI, it still has the baffle in here. Just imagine if he took the baffle out, how much louder and how much more fun this bike would be. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me once again. Please stay tuned for the comparison of my Street Triple RS along with the 890 Duke R. That's going to come after this episode. So stick around for that. Give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.